Given that my last video covered a sequel for a game that I haven't even done the predecessor for, and no, that wasn't just you thinking you missed the original video, it just never existed. And now this video is covering a sequel, I decided I'll rebrand the entire channel where I only cover sequels of games, and I'll call it Sequel Life. I think sequels have one of the hardest lots in life, having to live up to the shoes of their predecessor, all while bringing enough new to the table without muddying the formula so much that they're completely removed from what they started as. Nobody wants whatever Advance Wars Day of Ruin was, but they also don't want to rehash what has already been. Because of this, sequels are afforded one of the hardest places of critique, because there's already a foundation they have to aspire to achieve. I think the only other category that gets more flack is prequels, because it's really hard to get invested in a story where you already know the outcome, especially when the outcome is crap. This entire video could actually just be analysis of sequels. Hell, I could spend the next 30 minutes talking about how when RuneScape 2 transitioned to RuneScape 3, it massively split the player base of the game. In fact, that sounds much more amusing than this, let's just do that. My original Fatal Frame video is almost 6 months old at the time of making this video, and I have comments like this one from the Horror King asking if I played the other Fatal Frame games. And the answer to that is, yes, I actually have played them. I just take way too long to make videos because I do this really stupid thing called working a job to earn currency, which unfortunately is something I'm required to do until someone offers to pay me to make crappy videos about video games. In all seriousness though, huge thanks to the Horror King for the question, as it reminded me that I should go and record every single Fatal Frame game that I own, which is all of them. Yes, I imported some physical copies from Hong Kong because, as I've said so many times, physical media is where it's at.
I love
physical media.
It's so bad.
After painstakingly recording every game, procrastinating, lore dumping the entire story of Doom to my wife, and eating chicken nuggets, I decided it was time to finally get off my behind and bring people what they truly want to see. Me playing Fatal Frame 2: The Crimson Butterfly. Another day, another game checked off my backlog list, and once again I find myself safely nestled in the library of the PlayStation 2 for these videos. Again, and I can't stress this enough, the reason this keeps happening is because PS2 just has that many amazing games in its library, and there really is no other reason. This console just kicks so much rear end that I can't get away from it. Actually, the PlayStation 1 does too, so expect more videos about games from that era soon too. When it comes to Fatal Frame games, this is the one that got all the love and all the money. Because of every game in this franchise, this one has been the most preserved, with an Xbox version, PS2 version, PS3 Classics digital release, and even a freaking remake on the Nintendo Wii with updated controls, graphics, and visuals. Fatal Frame 2 definitely seems to be the fan favorite, and I can honestly see why. Fatal Frame 2 definitely does something different from its big brother and definitely succeeds in many areas. It's a game that feels less cryptic and more like an actual game. Fatal Frame 1 felt more like a story that was unfolding and you had to wander around finding the next set piece, whereas 2 feels more like an organic flow to it. There's love and heart put into this game, which shows that Koei Tecmo do love other things that are not games that require you to mash the X button over and over again, and jiggling boobies. For the sake of this video, in case you didn't read the title, ignored the thumbnail, or just for whatever reason just don't care enough to be observant, I'll be using the PlayStation 2 version as that's the version I have access to. It would have been nice to use the Xbox version as I hear it has improved visuals, but I don't own an original Xbox and shipping one here would be very expensive. One day. Fatal Frame 2 graced our consoles back in 2003 and was developed by most of the same key people from the original game. Remember that bit I said in my last Fatal Frame video where the creator said the original game was so scary that many didn't finish it? Well, maybe it was more along the lines the original game's story was so minimalistic and confusing that people didn't finish it. So the writers of Fatal Frame 2 took some writing class on how to actually make an overarching narrative that is concise enough to make people actually care about what's going on. Personally, I enjoyed the story of the first game, but I'm also someone who is obsessed with chubby seals, so maybe I'm not someone that people take that seriously. Fatal Frame 2 regardless would go on to be a huge success, scoring impressively among fans and critics, and was the true start of turning Fatal Frame from a 1-2 punch set of games into a full-blown franchise so that Koei Tecmo could squeeze more precious dollar dues from it. At the time making this video, there were actually 6 games in the Fatal Frame series, one of which being a spin-off on the 3DS, and it's a series that I've fallen in love with since making my original video on it. So buckle up because you're about to endure another one of my videos where an old fart rambles on about games that may have released while some of you were still in diapers or sipping from juice boxes. If you haven't watched my original Fatal Frame video, I recommend you do that now so you can have some understanding what's going on, or at the very least, a basis to go off for this video. But ultimately, it's not inherently necessary because Fatal Frame 2 takes more of a standalone approach and can be enjoyed without playing the first game, but it will help you understand some of this video. Anyway, I've rambled on enough and we really should get on with the video. After all, I have other games I have to be bad at for your entertainment. Fatal Frame 2 expands the environment of the first game. We have a lot more segments where we're outside rather than being almost exclusively cramped in small Japanese corridors. I really don't know what it is about Asian buildings and just being so overly cramped they make you feel claustrophobic, but I assume in Japan it at least has to do with the small amount of land available. Either way, it makes for great horror settings, but kind of harms the exploration. Luckily, Fatal Frame 2 is set within an entire village in the mountains rather than a single mansion, so we have a lot more area to look around, several buildings to explore, and even outdoor areas to traverse. With so many places to go, you don't feel like you're cramped looking at the same place over and over again like you did in the first game. Fatal Frame 1 had a lot of backtracking to the same areas that you've seen half a dozen times before seeing anything new. 2 deviates from this formula for the most part, and it feels like you're exploring new areas fairly frequently, though backtracking is still on the table as it is with all of these games. You would think this means getting turned around much more often and scratching your head wondering where to go, but I have to say that isn't the case. Fatal Frame 2 does a much better job dropping hints at what to do next, where you should go next, so you're not spending 80% of the game with GameFAQs open on an iPad like you were in the first game. A little aside here, but can we just applaud the absolute legends that pump out guides on GameFAQs? I think I started using them back in the early 2000s, and it's wild that even to this day, they often are the gold standard for guides, all made by dedicated players not even trying to collect a payday. Sometimes their guides even demolish those by paid gaming news sites. You're doing God's work, and I salute you. Back to Fatal Frame 2 though, with less time wandering around and wondering what to do though, the game definitely feels shorter than the first game, but that's only because you spend more time actually playing the game, not trying to figure out how to play the game. Basically, there's a whole lot less of having to activate huge brain mode necessary in this one. The set pieces are also far more interesting to look at. It just feels like there's more color overall, and less of the grainy camera filters to obscure things, making it easier to see what you're doing. The graphics and character models also saw an upgrade this time around, and look less stiff than before. Look-wise, Fatal Frame 2 just looks nicer to me, but that isn't to say the sequel didn't take some awkward missteps, as things do sometimes. Not every change is for the better, as the camera mechanics in Fatal Frame 2 are fundamentally different from the first game. The first game focused more on time locked onto the ghost and distance from the ghost and fatal shots. Fatal Frame 2 switches up to being almost exclusively about proximity to the ghost, which makes getting fatal shots far more crucial for combat encounters. When this first happened, I was a little confused at what was going on and why I wasn't racking up damage on the ghost until I looked it up online that the camera works completely different from the first game. It boggles the mind as to why you'd change one of the core mechanics of gameplay of a game without giving the player any kind of heads up, but then again, this was the time period where we were actually expected to read the manuals that came in these boxes. So I suppose I can't blame developers for me being evidently illiterate. What hasn't changed too much from the first game is the annoying camera controls would take some time to get used to if you've had it ingrained into your skull as how first-person camera controls are supposed to work. You'd think with these changes that Fatal Frame 2 would be far more challenging than the previous game, but you'd be mistaken. The difficulty of Fatal Frame 2 feels far more balanced, and the game gives you enough healing items to deal with the tasks at hand, whereas the first game treated healing items like rare gemstones that only the bravest explorers could find, which often resulted in taking massive hits to your health and thus negating the point of even getting them in the first place. 2 feels far more forgiving, and it's a nice change of pace to not feel like the game is brutalizing you at every turn. There are still legitimate challenging sequences, but these feel far more manageable and not just the game trying to emulate Dark Souls before it even existed. I think by the end of the game I had like a dozen healing items. Even if the final boss is a one hit and you're dead type of enemy, I still managed to beat it on the first try because the game felt straightforward enough to where I just knew what to do and how to do it. In terms of game design, 2 definitely outshined its predecessor in virtually every way that counted. Everything it does plays well into the horror atmosphere that it's trying to create, and I do love me some horror games. Getting to play this game felt like a real treat, and overall I would say when it comes to how this game was designed, the developers absolutely nailed it. It still has some of the usual jank that third-person semi-fixed camera angle games have, but it's far from inaccessible to a modern audience. It does have some so-so voice acting, which is only a minor improvement over the original game, though.
I captured a ghost with this camera. This camera has the power to expose things the normal eye can't see.
The audio of this game adds well to what it's trying to do, as the music fits what's going on well, and its great ending song, which I obviously can't play because I'll be attacked by copyright strikes, and my YouTube career will be over then. But take my word for it, it's pretty good. Fatal Frame 2 feels what a sequel should feel like, an evolution of what worked, ditching what didn't. You take a strong foundation and reinforce its weak spots, and that's what Fatal Frame 2 did for the most part. Though some of its changes are a little awkward, it definitely does a good job at trying to reinvent the franchise in a way that kind of makes it feel much more accessible in some capacity. Its flaws can easily be overlooked because it shines so well. Now if we only get the same treatment for Final Fantasy these days.
We used to play here all the time. Yeah. All of this will be gone soon. Is your leg okay? Does it hurt? It does a little, but I'm fine. Meow? Yes? Never mind.
So Fatal Frame 2, as I mentioned already, was made with the idea of putting a more in-depth story into the game that made people feel more invested. It was designed so that players would feel like they cared more about what was going on, to the point where they would actually want to finish the game. So the big question is, did they succeed at that? The answer would be, yes, actually. I can honestly say that Fatal Frame 2's story feels deeper and more concise than the first game. I genuinely felt like what was happening was more connected to the characters interacting with the story. First game was a lot of Miyuko and her brother just kind of being there in a haunted house while spooky haunted happenings were going on. But Fatal Frame 2 sort of is the building blocks of a much deeper story with characters who the game wants you to care about. You play as Mio Amakura, who with her twin sister Mayu travel to the mysterious village named Minakami in the mountains looking for their friend Yae, who is researching the village and a legend called the Crimson Butterflies. The two go looking for her when she doesn't return, and of course spooky haunted stuff starts happening, because every Fatal Frame protagonist just can't seem to resist going to spooky places despite every single warning signal that being sent their way to via obnoxious air horns. This just seems part of the norm for horror protagonists, where they just kind of seem to enter places that just really just tell you stay away. Two have to uncover the history of the Crimson Butterfly rituals to try and break the curse of the village. Like the first game, Mio obtains the Camera Obscura, but it's not the same one from the first game. Evidently, there are multiple Camera Obscuras floating around, each slightly different from each other. Much of the story has the two girls splitting up and trying to reunite, which means that protecting your defenseless partner is on the table, because she makes absolutely no effort to get away from Ghost, it seems. The spirits attempt to perform the Crimson Butterfly ritual on the twins, as apparently the ritual was done regularly with twins, sacrificing one of them in the end, so they pick Mayu for this role, which means Mio has to try and rescue her. The ritual in essence will break the curse in the entire village, freeing the spirits trapped there via Mayu's sacrifice, but Mio is having none of that and fights off vengeful spirits left and right to save her sister from being killed. Because apparently the entire village was cursed by some girl who pretty much put a curse on them for reasons, I guess. Mio ultimately destroys the spirits responsible for the curse in the first place, but in the end the house always wins, because the spirits possess Mio's body and force her to take Mayu's life anyway, and the ritual is complete. The spirits are freed and we're treated to a somber scene. There is an alternate ending where you can save Mayu from being sacrificed, but it has darker implications that Mayu is being possessed by an evil spirit in the end. Ultimately though, the ending where Mayu dies is considered the canon one. Similar to the story of the first game and definitely more simplistic, but I think the reduction of unnecessary details is what makes it more entertaining to follow. Most of what we're getting is getting to see Mio and Mayu's relationship as sisters, and I'm all for that because I genuinely felt bad in the end watching Mayu die. Fatal Frame games have kind of established this theme where the ending is always on a sad note, it seems, with some of the characters always dying. The story is delivered in small bursts over time as the player explores the village, and the village itself opens up plenty of context clues as to things going down prior to the twins' arrival, without being over the top with lore dropping. Ghosts even feel like they have some kind of context in the place they're haunting, which in the first game they had, but this one feels like it did slightly better in making the ghosts you're fighting feel like they actually belong in the environment they're in. While the story gives me less to talk about because it reduces the complexity, it makes it more interesting to follow because it's much more straightforward. The only drawback, I suppose, is that it makes this part of the video a bit shorter, and I'm giving the abridged version after all because I don't want to ruin all the fun you could actually have by playing the game. If you felt Fatal Frame 1's story was too obtuse to the point where you weren't even really sure what was going on or why, 2 is definitely a better attempt at making a story where you don't need to Google what's even going on. Or ask ChatGPT, as some of you do. I really enjoyed the story, and it's definitely something worth experiencing. It's an admirable follow-up to the first game, possibly even superior to it. Which is also why I didn't spoil everything in this video. Seriously, you should go try this game. Like I mentioned before, you could replay the game to unlock the alternate ending if you really wanted to, but Fatal Frame 2, much like the first game, has a missions mode where you can test your skills against certain ghost fights, and of course, alternate costumes and accessories for the characters. It's pretty similar to the first game in that respect, so I don't think it's going to add a ton of additional hours of content for most people, but that's okay because I think a lot of people have enough fun just jumping back in this game sometime later just to experience it a second time. It definitely felt less frustrating than the first game. It's much less of a grueling task to replay Fatal Frame 2, and you'll be screaming at your television far less than you did the first time around. It's not going to have the kind of New Game Plus stuff you're probably expecting from many games, such as lots of bonus content, but you get to max out your camera abilities and complete the ghost file list for fun. That is, taking picture of every ghost in the game. To be honest though, Fatal Frame 2 doesn't overstay its welcome. It might take you about between 10 to 12 hours to finish it for the first time, provided you don't get stuck that often. You're getting a decent experience, and I'm not much of a fan of games just dragging on for hours and hours without much reason. Horror games are always fairly short, but I think it's because it's hard to keep players scared after 10 hours in an environment. And it's probably better that horror games wrap up quickly. It's just too bad Eternal Sonata doesn't wrap up that quick. I think the biggest question asked though is, would I replay Fatal Frame 2 just for the fun of it? And the answer is, probably yes. It's a solid experience, and I've played the first game more than once, so I don't see why not. If you're looking for a good horror title in the PS2, you definitely won't be disappointed by it, that's for sure. There are other games out there to disappoint you, don't worry. At the end of the day, Fatal Frame 2 is just overall a better game than Fatal Frame 1 was. That's not to say Fatal Frame 1 is bad by any means. I mean, it's an iconic piece of survival horror for the 6th generation of consoles. But 2 just feels more polished of a game and will leave you less frustrated to play. You should definitely play both, but if you're only going to play a single entry in the franchise, this would be one that most people would recommend from the original trilogy. I know this video is a little shorter than most probably expected, but a lot of the second game is borrowing what the original did. I don't think you want to hear me ramble on about stuff that I've already rambled on about, so for full context, definitely watch the original Fatal Frame video that I did. I definitely do think Fatal Frame 2 does what a sequel is supposed to do, build upon its predecessor while bringing something new to the table that isn't so far removed that it feels like it belongs in a completely different franchise. With so much hope for survival horror's future around the corner, with Silent Hill F coming this October, and Resident Evil 9 on the horizon, maybe it's time Fatal Frame got a chance to shine once more. We can only hope. Thank you so much to everyone for watching. If you're new to my channel, I do retrospectives, mostly on retro games, so if that's the sort of thing you're into, definitely drop a sub and hit that notification bell so you're alerted when I make new videos. I do new videos every 3 weeks on Friday. If you want to support the channel, you can give this video a thumbs up, share it, leaving your thoughts in the comments below. That really helps me a ton. I have a goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers this year, and you can all make that come true. This is Wisplay, and that's enough of that.